Hello everyone. In this latest installment, I'll try to cover really a lot of ground, try to really bridge all of the two presentations I made before, and I really encourage you to look at the first one, which is the fractal universe, which is a kind of a basic explanation for how the universe works across time and space, and the second video, which shows how Source creates across past and future simultaneously, and how it can reconcile things that seem contradictory, such as science and religion. In this one, I'm trying to really answer all kinds of questions, such as what is the true nature of Source, the fact that it is everything and nothing, and how those two can be reconciled, looking at karma, looking at the meaning of life, looking at this transition 3D to 5D. I'll just really try to tie as many loose ends as possible. And then the next videos will just be hopefully shorter and on a very specific topic, zeroing in on questions you may have or clarifications. So let's get to it. Let's start with the true nature of God Source. So first of all, as you've seen in my second video, the true nature of God Source is an infinitely fast flickering between nothing or void and everything. And they are the same thing, and I'll explain why. First of all, just understand that since these two are interchangeable, you basically, many represent this as the yin-yang symbol. And for good reason, but I prefer to use this illustration, this one, because it's a little less gimmicky, I guess, or a little bit simpler. In an infinite void, how do you get from one to the other? You can tell a story from this perspective, from nothing to everything, and that would be telling the story from past to future, from our perspective. Or you can tell it from this perspective, from everything to nothing, and then you sort of tell the story from future to past. And this would be from the perspective of Source being everything. You could tell that everything, sort of created all the rest. And from nothing to everything, you could say that things were created gradually as a process, evolution or whatever. And both are true. But so here is how you get from nothing to something. So I'm not going to present in detail why nothing can be best represented as a circle. But let's just say that that is the true nature of nothing, simply because it's an equal distribution of nothing across space. They are all equally distributed with regards to the center. You can create an infinite number of circles outwards. You can still fit an infinite number of points along the lines of the circle because of pi. So it's the ultimate way of distributing nothingness that is perfectly symmetrical in all ways, in all possible ways. But so let's just say that the size of this is irrelevant. It's infinite. And what happens is that at a certain point in time, there's a sort of a paradox where a point at this end of nothingness meets a point at this end of nothingness. It's kind of like curved, but it has no idea that it's meeting itself. So it's almost as if you had two circles of nothingness that meet, except there's only one, of course, but it doesn't know that. And these 2 points touch, and they have to decide, and this is what I call God's game, which is the real start of everything, is who exists. See, there's only so many possibilities here. Either this point says, this is actually just my reflection, it's like a mirror, so there's just one of us. And this point plays the same game. Nope, this one is a reflection, there's just one of us. So you don't exist, you're 0 and I'm 1, and you are 0 and I'm 1. Basically, if both think that neither of them exists, it cancels itself out, 0. You could say that on, as far as a vibration goes, 0. Or they agree that both of them exist, you exist and I exist, then you get 2 or -2. Or one of them says we both exist and the other says only I exist, and then you get 1. And so you have the sort of the start of the universe. You can get a vibration from here, because basically what happens is this creates a distortion in nothingness, and nothingness then takes a form, takes some energy. Instead of being a perfect circle, it sort of bends itself in very random ways. And because this process is infinitely fast also, which means not only nothingness is infinite, but this process of meeting itself, because of its infinite scale, happens infinitely fast. Infinity is basically infinite in every possible way. Then all possible and impossible vibrations that could ever exist manifest themselves instantly. So what does this mean? It means that from nothingness, you go to everything that ever possibly can exist in the form of waves and energy, because this gets distorted basically. Nothingness meets itself, and then it creates a vibration within itself. And because it happens infinitely fast, all possible vibrations are created instantly, which means everything that can possibly exist manifests itself instantly. So you could say that here you have like Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. That materializes instantly out of the void. Your eye, for instance, manifests itself instantly out of the void. Your nose somewhere manifests instantly out of the void. That is the atoms composing, well, the subparticles composing your nose, the atoms composing your nose, the molecules composing your nose, the cells composing your nose. Everything materializes instantly as a vibration. And then you can give it form. You can see it as a nose, or you can see it as atoms, whatever you want, or a hair, or whatever you want. But then there's one law of the universe that makes sure that everything goes back to nothing almost as fast, just as instantly. And that is the law which is really, really important, that of perfect symmetry. And that law is, if something exists, then the opposite exists. And that's where you get your non-duality and duality, theories or whatever. If you have hot, then you have cold. If you have black, then you have white. If you have plus, negative, you have positive, and all of these things. But what it boils down to is perfect symmetry. And this more general rule, if something exists, its opposite exists. What this means is that if everything is indeed a vibration, then if this vibration exists, then necessarily this vibration exists. And if you superimpose both of them, they'll cancel each other out at every single point. Which means that the moment that everything manifests and materializes out of the void, it also instantly superimposes all of the possible infinite number of vibrations that can exist, superimpose themselves and then cancel each other out. Notice the infinity sign looks very much like two opposing waves that cancel each other out, and then you resort back to nothing. Or, people have said that it's a zero with a twist. Zero with a twist. Indeed, it's a zero with a twist. It oscillates like reality. The real sort of form of reality is an instantaneous flickering between 0 and infinity, or you could even say plus and minus infinity. Because again, if you have all possible positive infinity, then you also have all possible negative infinity because of the law of perfect symmetry. Now that we've covered this basics, how do you get from this reality of this infinitely fast flickering between the void, nothingness, and everything, but everything as in completely disorganized and a formless way? And that is a kind of a strategy which I call transcendence. People say, like, if you look at Alan Watts, and plenty of other spiritual teachers, they say that basically God is playing hide and seek with himself, which is kind of true. What it amounts to is God or Source wants to experience itself. The problem is every possible vibration that exists cannot experience itself, because the moment it tries, because it does that infinitely fast, it goes directly back to nothing. So there's no experience. So here is one thing that is key to understand. You cannot be everything and experience everything at the same time. That's not compatible. That is why they say that the true nature of God Source is pure beingness. Because the moment it tries to experience something concrete, it immediately goes back to nothing. Because it experiences everything infinitely fast. It cannot be anything less than infinity. To give you an idea as a metaphor, applying it to humans, it is as if you were born at the same time you died. Those cancel each other out. It is as if you were eating your favorite food and vomiting at the same time. Those two cancel each other out. It is as if you were sleeping and being awake. Those two experiences cancel each other out. You could say that this is, of course, just a metaphor, but basically it means that if you experience these two at the same time with no delay in, asynchronously, like one after the other, then it's as if you were experiencing nothing. So everything and nothing are one and the same thing for that particular reason. And this transcendence process, this hide and seek process, is God or Source giving itself a particular form which allows perfect symmetry from being delayed, let's say. So how does Source move from an infinite everythingness, everything possible, in the form of pure energy or pure waves, to something which escapes perfect symmetry? And here, in my visions, what I saw is the true nature of the photon which was basically a black hole made up of waves or energy. So the photon, which is like the most essential building block of the universe, you could say that before you had light, which is the photon, you had sound, which is pure vibration. And this is what Buddhists refer to as the Om sound, the initial sound of the universe, which of course then reverts back to nothingness immediately. And in order from transitioning to, just straight waves to photons, you sort of roll themselves, you just try to, you create a black hole basically which wraps waves around itself. And there you create the photon and you create light. And then the same problem appears. It's that light and this is why this is very hard to understand, but basically understand that this process of the photon appearing, how quickly do you think did source transition from being just pure sound or ohm or every possible energy wave to the photon? How fast? Infinitely fast. Infinitely fast. Which means that the various building blocks of the universe, which are I call them logic layers, materialized instantly, and then what happens is the experience between those logic layers then suffers from this kind of delay. So there are certain things that are outside of time, and that is the forms or the building blocks or the logic layers that source uses as a strategy for escaping perfect symmetry and managing to explore itself. And those building blocks is, here you can say that is ohm, pure energy. Then you have the photon. Then you have subparticles or elementary particles. You have atoms. You have molecules. You have cells or life. You have humans. And then you have, I don't know what, maybe ETs or something, extraterrestrials. Understand that from each and every one of these logic layers or building blocks, the complexity increases. That is, you can do many, many more things by assembling subparticles together and building some forms than you could with photons. And you have so many more interactions with atoms than with just subparticles. And you have so many more interactions between molecules. And you have so many more interactions and possibilities with cells. And so many more interactions with humans. Here is also an interesting idea to explore. It is the dichotomy between chaos and order. You could say that what God or Source does to experience itself is it always maintains one layer in chaos. One layer of the universe is not self-aware or is not 100% conscious. And that allows for all of the other logic layers to sort of be stabilized, or they can experience order. And what this means is that, for instance, we live in this reality, which of course is just it's just temporary form. It's not the real deal, but you don't witness in our reality atoms that suddenly decide to split from your body and go somewhere else because of a whim. You don't notice, or you do actually a little bit, you notice cells that behave like a cancer or whatever, but still less so than atoms. And you see, the level of consciousness and the level of self-awareness depends on how low you are on this logic layer. That is, you could say that photons are 100% conscious of themselves. They know what they are, and they behave exactly how they're supposed to behave. They have 100% reverse engineered what they are, and therefore they are 100% order. And if they are 100% order, that means they're perfectly symmetrical, because they're perfectly predictable, which means that out of the layer of photons, you'd go directly to nothingness if you hadn't subparticles, which sort of add complexity to this whole thing. But subparticles are also 100% self-conscious and self-aware. They know they are subparticles, they behave like subparticles. And the same applies to atoms, and the same applies to molecules. And you could say that here for cells, it's like 99% conscious. That is why you're alive for about 80 years and you don't die after a year or after a few months. If your cells were not almost 100% conscious of what they are and what they're supposed to do, you'd be dead. But humans, on the other hand, are like probably like 60% conscious of what they are. We are actually the least self-aware beings in the universe. That is, we are not human yet. We are not fully human yet. If we were fully human, then we would understand ourselves 100%. We would 100% know the laws that apply to us and how we should behave to each other in order to interact with each other in a harmonious way, like a global collective organism. And that is by design. That is why you shouldn't judge, or you shouldn't feel that, there's this evil and chaos is bad. Chaos is there for a reason. It is there because if one layer of the universe is not unpredictable and creates this kind of, I would say it's like an interference between, these otherwise perfectly symmetrical and perfectly predictable universes, then reality would dissolve instantly into nothingness. Instantly back into nothingness. Now, this brings me to another discussion, that of free will. People were made fun of because they were saying that Earth was at the center of the universe, and that was ridiculous, of course. But from a certain perspective, Earth is at the center of the universe. This is what people call the normal distribution, which is a statistical randomness. And you could say that the Earth sits perfectly in the middle between plus infinity and minus infinity, between sort of God and anti-God, or whatever. I don't know how to call those. Basically, we have a 50-50 chance of falling towards good or evil, or whatever dualities you can think of. If we were here, then we would be predictable. It is as if you had a marble. Imagine, for instance, here's a metaphor. Imagine you have two planets here, or two stars that have exactly the same mass. Exactly the same mass. Is equal. Like, say it weighs, I don't know, like 10 to the power of 20 tons. And really, to the Planck level, same mass. And at exactly equidistance from those two stars, there's a particle. At exactly the middle point between those two suns. To the Planck level, that is, it's exactly in the middle. Where is it going to go? And you understand that if it's here, then you can calculate its trajectory when it's going to be attracted by that star perfectly accurately. You can predict that from past to future without a problem, which means because it's predictable, it is also 100% order, and which means because of the law of perfect symmetry, it disappears instantly. It doesn't even have the time to do that, because there's an opposite particle, because if something exists, its opposite exists, which is attracted to this star, and those two mirror images sort of dissolve instantly. It doesn't even have the time to exist. So you could say that we are here as planet Earth, we are a point of friction between otherwise an infinite number of multiverses, or universes, or different universes, different timelines, different everything. We're a point of friction that prevent two mirror images of multiverses and anti-multiverses, or whatever, from disappearing, from canceling each other out. And that is also why we experience pain and suffering, because we are, in fact, the only it's the only place in the whole universe where you can escape the force of attraction of God, where you can actually pretend that God or anti-God or God does not exist. This is by convention, by the way. It's, whatever is plus or minus, it's a matter of perspective. You could say that this is all waves that are of this shape, and this is all waves that are of this shape. And of course, depending on which side you start to tilt on, if you think that, this is good and this is evil, then that is how it's going to be. But these are interchangeable because it's just a vibration. And of course, if you superpose this vibration on this vibration, it disappears. It cancels each other out. So from the perspective of this vibration, that one is evil. And from the perspective of this vibration, that one is evil. So whenever you sort of pick a side and you start rolling down that hill, then all of the vibrations, all the energies that you encounter from the other side are evil from your perspective. And these are the cycles, basically. You could say that Earth is oscillating here between these two. So that is why free will is so important and why we have free will. It's that it serves a very important purpose, that of enabling Source to really experience what it is when it forgets completely what it is, and also to experience all that it is when it remembers what it is. But when it remembers what it is, it's more predictable because whatever it creates is perfectly symmetrical. Whenever it creates something here, it creates the opposite here, because in infinity you have always perfect symmetry. Now, did I say all the things that I wanted to say? Yes, about karma now. Sorry, this is really a long video, but I really want to explore as many things as possible. Karma. Karma is not what we thought. Karma is quite simply reaching balance. Balance. That's all it is. Basically, your soul, which is part of Source, you could say the Source splits into several little souls that go on and explore. Those souls in infinity, each part contains the whole. And it's just a matter of conscience or consciousness to remember that you are the whole. Remember. What this means is basically, here is how I can exemplify this to you. Imagine a grid, that's reality, and with each point here representing a pixel of reality, and you have infinity in each of those pixels. You have infinity. So it's almost like a TV screen that flickers between all possible pixels infinitely fast. You do agree that when you take a snapshot, you just freeze time, and this is also stretches into infinity. In one single frame, you have everything. Why? Because if the frame is infinite, then you can have like the movie sort of, spread across this infinite space, and there are little boxes here which represent the current size of our universe, which would represent one frame of the universe. But each of those pixels, since they flicker infinitely fast between all possible states, if you stretch that across time, you'd obtain the same result as if you take a still snapshot, which means that infinity and all of reality is contained in each of its subparts. It's only a matter of perspective if you see it as space or time. And those two are one and the same thing. Space and time are one and the same thing. Time is space, space is time. For that particular reason, you could say that space-time is like a fabric on which you can print anything. You can print any type of universe, multiverse, whatever reality you want, because it's infinity both in in time, in how fast each point flickers between all possible states, and space. What I mean by how is this even related to karma? Well, just imagine that for each of these subparts to be equal to the whole, it has to be as balanced, just like the whole. So let me just set this straight. If you want to recreate an entire universe, you have to make sure that you have reached a 50-50 balance in energy. Why? Because if you're not balanced, then you are not a mirror image of source. You are not you're not balanced here. It's as if this infinite lacked, I don't know, a little bit from minus infinity or a little from plus infinity. You're not perfectly symmetrical, and therefore source cannot be or a universe cannot be recreated from you, because you tilt to one side or to the other. You would not be able to recreate everything from your soul. The metaphor I use is from a seed. A seed contains the potential for a tree, and a soul contains the potential for source. So source splits into different, souls, and once those souls have experienced all possible experiences as an atom, as plants, as humans, and whatnot, and once they have awakened their awareness to all of these realities, and they understand the 50-50 balance in energy, the order versus chaos, all of the different things that we talked about, they are a mirror image of source. You could think of them as being a little spermatozoa that can recreate an entire universe by, fertilizing a void, an egg, which is pure void, pure potential. And this contains the potential for a whole universe. And of course, if the spermatozoa's content is not fully balanced, then it'll create some deformity, something, it will not be able to sort of achieve the same wholeness as source. So again, coming back to this in more concrete terms, how does this apply to your life? It means that basically it's not that you pay for every bad thing that you've done by doing something good. You could also say that you're paying for all the good things by doing something bad. It's the same thing. It means that at a certain point you have, for instance, brought into your life 80% of so-called positive energy and 20% of negative energy, and there is an imbalance. You cannot recreate everything from that imbalance. You have to be in balance, so you have to have another life where you bring in 80% of negative energy and 20% of positive energy. And the reason why many spiritual teachers saying that today we don't have to worry about karma is that we're reaching balance anyways. And balance, because time does not exist, is reached always everywhere at the same time, which means every single decision you make in your life today reverberates across all of your incarnations instantly, and there's a sort of a correction that has to be made. And once all of your incarnations are in sync or in balance, that is the time where your logic layer has reached order, and where something else has to pick up and act as chaos, the chaotic element of the universe, keeping two perfectly symmetrical universes from touching each other. Oops. So that is what's happening to us right now. We have reached balance. We have nearly figured out the rules that apply to us as humans, so that we can act as a as a global organism. And so we are about to be born. And some other organism, which we are far from imagining, from some other being that we're far from imagining, is going to wake up in a world that is completely unbeknownst to itself, and we'll be inside its body, metaphorically speaking, and enjoying the ride, being 100% fully conscious of what we are, knowing that we are from Source, while that being has no idea and will continue in duality and juggle and struggle with order and chaos. Maybe just a last thing about, if I can, because it's really long, I'm really sorry, but it takes time to explain all this. This whole 3D, 5D, 8D, whatever, I really don't like these terms because they're often misunderstood. You have to understand that from this logic of the different layers of the universe, if you looked at my other videos, these logic layers, understand that these logic layers sit outside of time, and that each one of them can be thought of as a dimension. The photon is like one dimension, subparticles are a dimension, atoms are a dimension. And so in the visions that I had when I had the revelations to understand all of this, what I saw is that 3D, what we call 3D, we call it 3D because time stops for a logic layer that has reached perfect order or perfect symmetry. So the world of physics and chemistry has sort of become 100% conscious of the laws that govern itself, so 100% predictable, or close to 100% predictable. And so what happens is that time stops here. It's like a template. This is at the stage of, this is like DNA. And then as life emerges, like the first cell emerges, it can then play around in all of the possible universes that are created via physics and chemistry by navigating inside of them. So you could say that here it's like an infinite number of still frames of all of the different possible universes that can exist out of physics and chemistry, and wherever life emerges, it then navigates in these frames and modifies them, and in order for this to continue to exist and for avoiding perfect symmetry. It's like a scrambling algorithm, basically. Again, this idea of God playing hide and seek with himself. So understand that whenever a cell divides into two cells, it's not what it appears. What they're doing is they're copying the whole universe. They're copying the entire universe and then navigate inside of their own little universe. And there's still some kind of, link or bridge between themselves to allow to communicate and to agree on a sort of a consensus reality, a consensus universe. But they live in their own universes. They pick from the infinite number of possible universes that exist within the laws of physics and chemistry. They navigate through it in a unique way, and they copy all of it and then wrap it around themselves. So biology is in a 3D because it navigates in a third dimensional way and across time in still an infinite number of still 2D frames of everything that's possible from the laws of physics and chemistry. And what happens to us once we awaken as humans is that we will be able to navigate inside an infinite number of still frames of the universe of all things that are possible with biology, you could say. And to us, it would say, oh, we can navigate through time and we can navigate through space and we don't have bodies or whatever. But it's the same exact thing. The cells were doing it already, except they're doing it with the layer below. And we're doing it with the layer of biology. Once we've transcended biology, basically. And again, our role, or the role of the being that is actually composed of us as its cells, is chaos from its perspective and order from our perspective. And this is really hard to understand, but it's very simple actually. Chaos and order is a matter of perspective. For instance, when you're sitting down in your couch and you're just laying around doing nothing, inside your body there are trillions and billions of processes, of biological processes happening. Cells are dying, cells are being born all the time. Everything is changing. From your perspective, you're just chilling, and it's order, and it's fine. And so, in our perspective, for instance, we could be in paradise, enjoying, free energy. Free energy, which, by the way, our cells enjoy. Because, who has to worry about getting food? Who has to worry about breathing? It's us, it's not our cells. They're comfortable in our bodies and getting, whatever they need. So we get free energy, we get plenty of different advantages. And the being that is above us, that we are a part of, it struggles with the same questions that we have struggled for. Who am I? Why am I here? Which are the two fundamental questions of this hide-and-seek game that God plays with himself, and which every single layer of the universe has to go through. Photons had to ask that question, who am I, why am I here? And the reason why photons exist is because they have successfully answered these two questions. They know fully well who they are, why they're there, and what source is, and they act as photons every single minute. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here talking about it. And the same for atoms. They've also answered that question. Molecules. And we are answering that question now, and we're about to have an answer. And the proof of that is all the things that are being posted daily from different spiritual teachers that explain what this reality is, what the truth of source is, and even this video and plenty of other videos. It means that we have reached that kind of point where we're come full circle. We understand who we are, we understand why we're here, and so that question has to go upwards towards some other being. Just one thing about karma, just for all those that still have a struggle with trying to understand why free will is important, why non-judgment is important. Here's a nice metaphor for you. It doesn't mean that we all have to experience killing someone in order to be complete as source and being able to recreate everything possible. Here's a video of someone playing terribly the violin. Now that was really painful to listen to, but you have to understand that in order for you to be able to play beautifully the violin, you also have to allow for the possibility to play horribly. Which means it's not about everyone has to experience killing someone in order for being a carbon copy of source and being able to recreate everything from its soul. A whole universe that is balanced. It just means that you understand that you can. You have that potential. It is like playing horribly on the violin. You can play horribly on the violin. You choose not to, but you don't discount the possibility that you can. It's like all the notes on the piano. You don't have to play all of the notes. You just have to understand that they are all of them are there, and you get to choose the tune that you play, but without trying to eliminate a note or a scale or a melody, because ultimately it depends how you play, just like the violin. And I think it's the best metaphor I can come up with to understand that transcending good and evil is not about saying there is no good, there's no evil, and everything is relative. It is to say, maybe from my relative point of view there is evil, but I accept it as a possibility, and I choose not to engage in it. I choose not to engage in it. I choose not to go there, because ultimately it's about vibrations and it's about perspective. And that is when you reach the 50-50 balance. That is when you really understand, when you quote unquote wake up. And it doesn't mean total equanimity. It means equanimity. It's like that everything goes, that you don't really care what happens. That's kind of, you have to transcend that state. It's basically you choose, and you choose from your subjective point of view. I choose because that's what I choose. Not because it's good, not because it's evil, just because it's my choice. That is the tune I want to play. That is the tune that I decide to play. And I respect others that play a different tune, but I'm going to play mine. Finally, I'm going to read to you a little essay that I wrote for you to really understand and grasp this. That it's about the meaning of life, and it's a metaphor about the kind of state of mind you have to be in order to understand source. This is a story of millions of spermatozoa suddenly appearing in the middle of an unknown and hostile world. Up until then, they were cozily sleeping in paradise. Why have they been released in this acid world who wants them dead? They start exploring in all directions. Some are attracted by the light, thinking it might be the way out, and they die. Others, not wanting to go on a pointless exploration quest, find a nice and soft spot along the sides, doze off in contemplation, admire the beauty and moist of what seems to be a cavern, and wait for death's tender embrace. Carpe diem, the saying goes. Others still fight between each other under the spell of their fear of death. They take the lives of others as a proof of their own will to live, somehow feeling that it might give them power over life and death. Finally, a group of spermatozoa pushes forward courageously into the darkness. Perhaps the answer they seek is in the mysterious and the unknown. Suddenly, after having traveled for a long, long time, they find themselves in front of an object that irradiates magic and mystery. The spermatozoa surround it and try to guess what the object may be and what its significance is. The first spermatozoa shouts out impetuously, "This is the works of Satan himself, evil incarnate which ensnarled us into coming here to die and then burn in hell." A gentle wave rippled through the object, which grew slow slightly, but nothing seemed to happen. The second spermatozoa tried next and said, "This is the works of God, unconditional love. It will lead us to paradise and will free us from our suffering." The object duly noted the compliment, and its surface shape lightly changed. The third spermatozoa took his turn and declared, "I've taken empirical measures. We're in a tunnel which measures 8,495 spermatozoa units large and 49,387 spermatozoa units deep. This is a sphere. Let me just measure it. It will take but a moment, the time to find the number pi." The object listened intently, and its surface rounded up neatly. The fourth spermatozoa claimed loud and proud, "Who cares what this is? First, are we sure that our senses don't deceive us? What is the truth? All of you have your little theories, but what are they really worth? Know thyself, that's challenged enough." And upon those words, the object disappeared to the eyes of the fourth spermatozoa, who twisted around himself by trying to find all the answers within. The object vibrated a little, as if it were offended. The four spermatozoa died in turn in a hostile acid environment. As he died, the first spermatozoa noticed a huge pit opening beneath him, and he descended to hell. The second found himself in heaven in front of God. The third appeared in a high-end scientific laboratory. The fourth one found himself alone in the void of space. Finally, after the religious, scientific, and philosophical spermatozoa, an ordinary spermatozoa stepped forth and stammers, "I don't know who I am, nor why I am here. I don't know who you are, nor why you are here. I think you are whatever we want you to be. All at the same time, all and nothing at all. Good and evil, science and religion, order and chaos, the truth and lie. You can be potentially anything. The only thing I am certain of is that I don't want all this adventure to amount to nothing. Gone through all of the hardships, all of the joys, all of those moments of awe and mystery, laughs and tears for nothing. I am a question. You are another question. Together we will form a new question even more complex than our own, to be born in a hostile and unknown world, having to start the same journey all over again. The mysterious object opens up and welcomes the spermatozoa within itself. They forget who they thought they were, and forget what they thought they knew, knowing only one thing, that they will live another day and enjoy the privilege of asking once more, who am I? Why am I here? At the same time, the souls of the 4 spermatozoa are victims of their own mental prisons for having belittled the importance of life. The first one will be tortured in hell until he understands that evil on the outside is only a reflection of the evil he holds on the inside. The second one will be pampered in paradise until he snaps out of it by sheer boredom and takes a bite of the forbidden apple. The third one will calculate an infinite amount of problems impossible to solve until he is forced to admit that there are many things that are beyond the reach of empirical truth. And the fourth one will have to recreate a universe all by himself until he admits that such universe is pretty shallow and starts to seek the truth outside of himself again. Life is everything and its opposite, a complex blend which may not be always to our liking, but things may be simpler than they might appear. The meaning of life is life itself, life for its own sake. And so this is the question that all of us will have to answer ultimately. If we were given a choice to start it all again, to recreate it all again as if from the start, would we do it? Would we say yes? Would we say, even though we've suffered, even though it was painful, was it worth it? Would we do it all again if we were given the choice? And if you cannot answer yes to that question, then you're not ready yet. But it's fine, because we have all of eternity. There's no deadline. There's an infinite amount of time. You have an infinite amount of time. You can take your time until you're ready to accept that. That's the whole point. Is that if you were given a choice, you would say, I'd start over any day and recreate it just as it was. I hope this video was clear. If you have any questions, let me know, and I'll try to make shorter videos where I provide more specific answers.